Hey guys, what's up? I am Chase Thompson from the Note MBA podcast. In today's show, this was show number 2 of the Note MBA podcast. We talked a lot about staying out of the ditch. And what that basically meant is staying focused on the things that are important and the things that are right in front of your face. Those things that are right in front of your face when it comes to your business and your life. Robby literally ended up in the bottom of a ditch by not doing this. So on today's show, that's what we talked about. And we talk about a ton of stuff. But the other thing that we covered that I thought was particularly important was the JV Golden Rule. Now, you're going to want to dive in on this episode to hear about both of those things and much, much more.
First, seconds, performing, non-performing? What the f***? Note buyers, when it seems like you're in this business alone, know Chase, Robert, and the rest of their tribe are at it every week. They're bringing updates from their own note businesses as they work to find, fund, and finish deals. Follow along as they share their grassroots education with you, tuition free. If you'd like to know more about what they do and to download the entire back catalog, check out notemba.com. Now, here are your hosts, Chase Thompson and Robert Woods.
No.
Okay.
Hey, buddy. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. It is a brisk 60. No, I'm sorry. It's a brisk 35 degrees here in Texas this morning at 6 a.m. So it's good. It's good times.
And I'm in a long sleeve shirt, but that's because I'm bandaged up.
Bandaged up is something that we will definitely be getting to in this podcast. That is the most fascinating story to me in the past week. The video, well, yeah, we'll get into what's going on there.
Perfect.
I love it. Oh, so the story I was going to tell you right before the podcast. One of my favorite podcasts, the way that he starts his show, he basically says like it's Tuesday, November 18th. Let's get on with the show. Like, it's like super boom, boom, boom. And there's like some intro music. And then right before he like has his guest come on, he says, so who are you and what do you do? And they like dive in. It's the greatest intro ever. Like, there's no, granted he's like 400 episodes in or something like that. So like you kind of, if you've been listening for a while, you know what you're getting. And if you haven't been listening for a while, it's like, hey, whatever. Take it as
cool.
it is.
So it'll be interesting to see what ours sounds like in another 52 weeks.
Wow, just going to project out all super far like that. That's good. No, I agree. I think it's great. So we have numerous things we want to talk about today. Do you want to dive in on the bandages first? We could talk about, got some marketing stuff to cover, some deal stuff to cover. Where do you want to go?
I think we need to talk about the bandages, and the reason why, 2 parts. One is I'm working on our quick start guide. What do you need to do to get started in the note business? What's the important stuff? So I'm working on that. And I was typing up. I haven't been able to type for the last 3 days because of the swollen hand. But the swollen hand goes exactly to my number 1 point on the quick start guide for what everybody needs to do for this business.
So was that on purpose or it just kind of happened organically? What's the situation?
Oh, I wish it went on purpose. So, I went up, you saw I posted a video on my Facebook, me looking all happy in front of my cottage I'd rented up in Pi. I had taken that 4-hour drive through the mountains. The video needs to be edited. Actually, I bought a shirt. It's like 794 curves. And I said it was like 490. It's 740 some curves, 4 hours north of Chiang Mai.
Curves up a mountain?
Up a mountain.
So like so 700 something double backs, basically. Like crazy. Oh wow.
Windy, curvy. You've got that. You've got these minibus vans that take all the tourists up and back and forth. And these guys do not use lane courtesy. They pay taxes for both sides of the lane. They use both sides of the lane coming up and going down. So it's a little treacherous.
It's like that classic scene you see in a movie where it's just like that unsafe, like ridiculous. And you're like, no, that's legit. That's real talk.
Yeah. Well, so here's what's funny. I was like, oh, this is going to be a long ride. So of course, I'm like, okay, I haven't been up there. I haven't done the ride. So I'm focused the whole time. The last hour of it, we did in the dark. I've got bad night vision, so I'm hyper-focused on the road. We get into Pi a couple days. It is gorgeous. So long story short, I shoot that video, the one that's up on my Facebook page. I'm all smiling and happy. I'm in front of this beautiful cottage. It's great scenery, telling people about all the things you can do up there. So fast forward about an hour from that video. I got it posted. We hit the road. we're going to go do I don't even know what day it was, Sunday drive on the scooters. We go out into the country. And we're on a gravel road, and I'm just kind of not paying attention to a thing. And I'm looking up at shanties, straight shacks. But I'm just looking up in the hills, not paying attention. And as soon as I look at the road, a curve has come, which I have not seen. And I go straight off the road into a ditch, bike Robby and all, fill my knee, my arms, my hands full of gravel and dirt, and just kind of look at myself. Thankfully, I was only going about 20 miles an hour. So I've got a ton of road rash. Nothing broke. The bike's a little scraped up. But, I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't focused.
So we had like one show where I had a co-host, and then we almost had no more shows with me having a It was almost like, all right, now I'm co-hostless thanks to the mountains of pie over in Thailand.
Yeah, well, I was left-handed. This hand was swollen like 3 times the size it is, and I can type today and do it. But so the reason I want to get into it and why it's so important, the number one thing I'm working on the Quick Start Guide is setting your goals and making sure you have written goals and what are you focused on. And I'd be an idiot if I didn't admit that getting on the back of a scooter and a motorbike and going somewhere, one of my goals should be to pay attention to how it relates to setting goals. And a lot of it is at some point when you take your eye off the goals and you stop focusing on what you had written down, or really if you hadn't even written it down in the first place, the road for me or life and business is going to throw you a curve. And a lot of it's about just getting back up and making sure you put on a smile, no matter how stupid you feel. It's hard to walk around the small town of Pi and everyone not to know that you found a ditch on your motorbike when you're wearing these bandages all over your hands, arms, and legs. So it's going to happen in life. But the big part of what I wanted to getting at is just how important it is to be focused on your goals, constantly reminding yourself. And, I lost sight of it while I was on the bike and whoops, ended up in a ditch. But
and then, of course, the redemptive power of getting back on the bike and regaining focus and all the things like that, of course, are also very important. But hopefully, you avoid being in the ditch, and hopefully you avoid those struggles if you can. Obviously, no, I think it's great. I think it's great because it didn't happen to me, but I think it's an awesome lesson for all of.
Oh well, it so is. A lot of it too is borders on. I'm really comfortable on a bike. It wasn't that I was doing something stupid. I was just too comfortable. And I think as it pertains to business, that's when things start to go amiss sometimes. You get a little too comfortable with something and you stop paying attention. And that's when you end up in the ditch, or that one thing kind of slides away. And it's that loose gravel under your back tire that you're not paying attention to.
So that's so not only is that a really great corollary between the Quick Start Guide that we're going to be putting out for you guys on your kind of your first 2 months or what have you in trying to attack the note business, but it's also a great corollary between the deal that we were talking about right before we got on. You were using a great software piece to track your deals. They upgraded one of the aspects of your note deal. Just didn't translate over whenever they did their upgrade. It is what it is, and so you had an expectation for a return. Kind of eyes off the ball, yada yada, not for any other reason than it just kind of happened, and then you were in a situation where your expenses were higher than you were expecting, and so your return isn't terrible. Your return's great, but you are now presented with a situation where it's just like, well, dang, not as good as I would have thought. You know what I mean?
And it does correlate exactly that situation. That's not even a point of finger. That's just it happened.
Right.
And that deal itself, when we get into it, we'll talk about that in a minute. I think a couple great lessons are going to come out of that. They've already come out of it for myself, but definitely for the listeners. Should we jump into that now?
Yeah, go for it. I mean, and that wasn't even on necessarily, which is great, not even on purpose. I mean, but right before we got on, you were like, oh, by the way, that deal that we were going to talk about, da-da-da. And then hearing you kind of talk about the explanation of gravel in your paws and stuff like that, that to me seems like a great segue.
Yeah, so what it is, and it turned out to be a great deal. It flowed so quickly. I bought a note up in Kansas City, and my mother actually lives in Kansas City. So as it pertains to your network.
Shout out to Miss Woods.
Yes, Mama Duke's out there.
Mama Duke. There we go. Sweet.
the great thing about it, I sent her to go look at assets in Kansas City. And I was like, go take your camera, go take pictures. Let me know what you think of the house.
Let that be a lesson, though. Let that be a lesson to everybody. If you don't have the hustle to send your mom out to look at your deals when you're halfway around the world, I don't know how successful you're going to be.
For it. What was great about it? I hate to sidetrack, but she took my niece with her, and they were looking at a duplex, and the duplex was pink. And all she kept asking my mother is, why would Robbie want to own a pink house? Why does he want a pink house? And she's like, sweetie, I don't know why he wants to own any of this stuff, but apparently it makes him money.
Hey, there you go. Sweet. So continue. So she goes out to check it out.
So I sent her out there. She took pictures of it. Not a great house, but with the numbers, a great deal. I picked up the mortgage was about $52,000 on the UPB, the unpaid balance. I paid 10% of UPB, so I got a sweetheart deal on it. I paid $5,200 for it. The BPO was high at the time. And the BPO that from the brokerage I bought it from was telling me it was coming in around $18,000-$19,000. As is condition, that was a little high. But the best part of it, we picked it up. 3 phone calls from my servicer. They got a hold of the primary borrower, and he goes, hey, we can't afford it. Can we do like a deed in lieu? We don't want the house anymore. I get a call from the servicer, and I'm like, well, that sounds great. I know from title it's clean. We're the only lien on there. There's nothing from the city. Taxes, it's only 1 year out. So nothing crazy. So the servicer processes the deed in lieu. We get it. I send a local management company that I'd found. They did construction work, also remodel work in Kansas City, out to the property to change the locks and get me some internal pictures. So here's the lesson number 1 is I had to pay to have somebody go out and get the locks changed when I should have had a conversation, in my opinion, with the borrower to get a copy of the key. That was a small save. That would have been like $125. That doesn't make or break your deal. What happens next, the management company goes out, they take pictures of the property, the internal condition. It looked like people had been not living there, but there had definitely been squatters at some point. There was just trash everywhere. So it had to get cleaned out. I can't send investors in there. I can't let a realtor go list it. So what I've learned, and what I learned from that situation, it ended up costing me somewhere in the neighborhood of about $2,100. And that was for the clean out. That was for the dumpster. I had to have the lawn care done. And in my thoughts, looking back at the deal, I should have had the borrower send me internal pictures and just said, hey, before I can let you walk away from this, I need to see the internal condition of this property. Now, not that I was going to hold it against him, but that way I know, and I think it's a good bargaining chip to basically be like, hey, man, I'm letting you walk away from $50,000 in debt. I'll hire the dumpster, but I need you to get this stuff cleaned out. Call me in 2 weeks when it's cleaned out, or let's work a deal like that. And I think that's really where I missed an opportunity to save and make an extra couple $1,000s on this deal.
And that's not like a typical type of transaction of savings where someone's trying to, scrape pennies at the expense of dollars or what have you. I mean, those are really easy conversations to have, and conversations where I'd expect, the borrower to be like, yeah, sure, that sounds great, yada, yada. And I mean, on the back end, very little work on your part minus a conversation and thousands of dollars on the other side. So, I guess from a perspective of some of the things we're going to be covering in the podcast, from a kind of a geo arbitrage kind of location optimization standpoint and things like that, where sometimes you're not necessarily doing things to save thousands. It's just kind of a couple hundred or whatever the case is. In this case, I mean, like that's a tremendous amount on a deal where your BPO is sitting at 19,000, and you said that was a little high. So $2,000's a pretty good portion of that.
$2,000's a great portion. And here's the funny thing is we'll get our numbers at the end of the month. Like I said, we're doing this accounting of my spending here. But if I took out airfare from the equation, $2,000 will be, more than what I spent for my month here.
Oh, see, so that makes it tremendous. I mean, like that's a tremendous amount. I mean, and for some people, depending on where you're at getting into the business, that's, that might be your monthly or U.S. side, right? Like you live in some city in the U.S. and your monthly take is, after tax or whatever is $2,000, $3,000 or whatever. And having these type of conversations now allows you to stay in that business, stay in this business 1 month longer, 1 month longer, one month longer.
I mean, for somebody making $30,000 a year, that's an 8% raise.
Sure.
If you look at the before after tax kind of stuff. But so I think that was one of the great lessons that I learned. It's something I definitely want all of our listeners to keep in the back of their head. I experienced it firsthand, so I know next time I hear deed in lieu, I'm going to say, hey, well, let me talk to the borrower, not because I don't want them to have a deed in lieu. If I've got clean title behind me, give me the property, get out of it. That's the best deal I could get. But let me see what the inside of it looks like so I know what I'm getting into. And I think for most homeowners, most borrowers in that kind of a situation, we talked about it last week, my situation. Had he called and been like, well, I need you to do X, Y, Z, make sure the windows are clean and you vacuum the carpets. I would have been over there with a thing of Windex and borrowed a vacuum if I had to.
Well, sure. You're the motivation on the other side of it when they can't afford it. They don't want a foreclosure. They don't want other things kind of hitting them. And they just want this weight off their shoulders. A vacuum over, at 19,000, I doubt this was a mansion. You know what I mean? To vacuum, whatever it is, 1,000, 1,500 square foot or whatever, is a simple thing to ask somebody. Run a lawnmower. Have your buddy come out for $30. I don't care what you do, but you don't. It's not a hard conversation to have with someone who's extremely motivated to move on.
Yeah. So here's actually what I want to give people too, an idea of a timeline for this actual deal. We acquired this note in the middle of June. And after getting everything boarded, everything taken care of, Richmond Monroe got all my assignments recorded, so everything was good to go on that end. We made first contact with the borrower in July. I think it was the first or second week of July, it was right after the 4th of July holiday, because I'd actually been in Kansas City for the 4th of July. And we've gotten the deed in lieu. It's processed. This was in June. July made contact. By the end of September, we had the deed in lieu recorded. October, I spent getting everything cleaned out. I actually sent some buddies up there, which was another resource that, like I said, I'm never afraid to ask anybody to help me, and, paid them a very good sum for their labor. But they got the place cleaned out for me. And it went on the market 10 days ago. We've already got an offer accepted.
So that's tremendous. I mean, from a perspective of a lot of people wanting to get in this business, a lot of people they have a buy and hold mentality after they kind of learn a little bit about notes. And, the strategy of buy and hold within notes is loan modifications and things like that. What you're talking about is, extremely reminiscent, an amazing corollary to what would be essentially a fix and flip without any of the fix part, really. It's more like almost like a wholesale deal. You just bought it as is, mowed the lawn, sold it as is, and did it all with, 60, 90 day, you know what I mean? Like that really kind of short window.
And you know what makes me even more excited about this deal is when we were looking at it, after I got those internal pictures, I got really worried. I wasn't sure who was going to go after this. If it was a great option for an investor, I gotten quotes in the neighborhood of about $50,000 for the remodel. And given the time it was going to take to remodel it, rental rates in the area, if I had put that extra $50,000 into it, I was looking at like an 8% annual return. We got rid of it. Yeah, it's not a huge moneymaker, but we made 10% in 6 months. It's a 20% annualized return on our money. I'm happy with that deal, and that money will be back in my bank account in 2 weeks, ready to go back out and start working again.
Right. You're just able to recapitalize your money. Boom, done.
Yeah.
Deal done, gone. And for a lot of people that are listening, I mean, this is the type of deal where for pretty much every single person I've talked to, people that have closed hundreds of notes, people that have closed 2 notes, the hardest thing for them was the first one. Get over the hump, get the first one done, and then move on down the road and start knocking out number 2, number 3, number 4, number 100, right? So you did that roughly under 10, obviously under 10K, 5,200 to acquire, $2,000 to kind of, blah, blah, blah on down the road. But I think that's fantastic. I think that's fantastic,
I think, The realtor made about as much money in the deal as I did, but she did some work. So that's how it always goes when I made the lazy way, which is, I think, something also to talk about down the road. Because I was over here, because I had a lot going on with other deals, I was happy with the margin I was making and didn't actually get out and try to market it myself just because I wanted to get the money back. And I don't know if that was a good idea or a bad idea in hindsight. Some of it maybe is a velocity of capital issue. I've got it back, so I'm not worried about it. But did I
almost like a survivorship bias? Like it ended up, everything ended up great. So you're just like, it was great. And I guess I understand that. All I would say though is it's a different type of strategy where you're at. You know what I mean? You and I both know a guy that's out of KC, and if he, we're in, he's in Kansas City, he's up there, whatever. If he's in this deal, it's a very different strategy that he utilizes, and that doesn't even necessarily mean it's because it's in his backyard. It's just because he's not, in a 12-hour time difference. He's not maybe dealing with, you've got quite a few notes kind of in your portfolio that you're trying to, work through. If this is your singular note, you're probably doing it differently. So I think it just speaks to the difference of the myriad of different strategies, the different ways you can exit. Again, goes back to the different ways that you can, make or lose, a couple $1,000s per deal, depending on the ways you decide to go about it. And you're not always going to get maximum capital potential back every time. That obviously should be a goal, but especially if it's on your first, second, third, fourth, you're probably going to make a mistake, or you're probably going to not even call it a mistake, but just not know.
Call them learning lessons.
Yeah, not know all the intricacies,
for education.
No, I think it's fantastic. I think it's great. It's better than, learning your lessons through a $6,000 loss. You know what I mean? You still got a great return, learned a ton, and now you've got capital to throw back at the market. I think it's win-win-win-win-win down the road.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess the best part is, we were talking last week about what's one of the things that gets in the way of people. And I was talking to a friend of mine that's looking to do an investment last week, and he was kind of, he's like, well, I want stuff in these neighborhoods. And I was like, here's the thing, man, you got to get out of your backyard, and you got to be you got to be willing at some level to not focus on the physical asset. The physical asset's important, but it's not. I mean, this is a house. If you saw the inside of it, my father's first response, we actually got in an argument about this. His first response when I sent him the pictures was, "Oh, we should just bulldoze it." And I got so mad. I'm like, man, come on, there's money to be made there. That's I see the diamond in the rough. I'm gonna polish that turd, so to speak, which it got polished, but this wouldn't have been a property you wanted to own.
Well, there's that. And if he was, I'm not saying he was looking at it this way, but I know a lot of people look at almost every at bat like they're trying to hit a home run, and that's fine. If you're wanting to do that, it goes back to, harkens back to this, the anecdote everyone knows about, Babe Ruth, home run king or whatever, but he was also the strikeout king or whatever. And that's fine.
Yeah.
If you're in, playing baseball, that, that's kind of part of the game, but I don't necessarily have the capital to try to swing for the fence every time, and striking out is extremely expensive, and might knock me out of the business depending on how new I am at it. It just isn't, like you were saying, this might not be a property you want to own because of the neighborhood, because of X, because of Y, because of Z, because it was going to take all this work, whatever the case may be. Swinging for the fences every time is not always the best strategy. And rarely often
here's
is
the other
it.
thing,
I mean,
too. I look at this deal, and if you step back, and I think if I put an investor into this, would they, if this was my money I had given to somebody else, and they called me and said, hey, this is what we've got, and I saw this all the way through, and 3 months ago you sent me pictures of this house with a hole in the roof, no copper, plumbing needs replaced, mold in one bedroom so bad that the floorboards are completely gone, so much water damage. And then you call me and you go, hey, we got an offer. 7 days later, we countered it. We got an accepted offer 10 days after putting it on the market. I made you 10%. Are you okay with that? Would I give that person my money back? And I'm like, well, yeah, because I think a lot of it comes down to, if we're taking outside investment, our job is not only to make them a profit, but minimize risk and make sure we're at least getting them their capital back at a bare minimum.
Well, yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. In fact, totally agree. And, that's what I was looking at when you were explaining this deal. Dave Ramsey obviously is a name that a lot of people know. And one of the things he always mentions on his show is that he likes to give advice as if, what he would do in a situation, or, you know what I mean? Like that type of thing. That's exactly what you're saying here. And this has been a key portion for, communication with outside investors when you start taking them on. And for some people, that's almost immediately because you don't have the capital, right? You really need to look at it and look at the situation. Is this a deal I would get myself, I would want someone to bring me in on? Is this a deal I would, put my own money into? Yada, yada, yada. When it comes to an outside capital situation, I think a lot of people, they take, as dumb as it sounds, they take it for granted, even though how hard it might have taken them to find that outside capital or whatever the case is, and they just try to shoehorn someone into a deal or, whatever the case may be, try to swing for the fences so, they look really great to an investor. What a lot of people don't understand from an outside investing standpoint, returns are great, but what they really like, security, trust, the lower the risk, the low risk, things like that, because that's where they got where they were. It's great when you're able to give them a slam dunk, double digit, higher than, 5 point higher than expected returns, blah, blah, blah. That's awesome. But that's not necessarily what they're always looking for.
Yeah, and it's great that you said that. I think that's another thing to talk about, and we'll hit on it multiple times because it's something that's happening. It's you're sourcing outside capital. I'm sourcing outside capital. A lot of it is in the questions too you ask your investors. What conversations do you have with them up front? Because I've got one investor that almost doesn't reply to emails, and I'm not offended by it. But I don't know what to think. And then every time I get a response from him, it's just like, oh, hey, man, sounds great. Glad things are going well. Let me know if you need anything. And then I've got another investor that, he likes to get an update every 2 weeks. And so I just type him a little 3-sentence email, and he's happy with it. And then I've got some people that are in the middle. But a lot of that, is making sure you have those conversations up front.
And that's really, speaking to that, I've got one guy that's the same kind of way as that first guy you mentioned. And it sounds like it would be great to have someone who's just almost carefree about it. But at the same time, sometimes it's hard, as all of us know, when it comes to understanding tone in text message or email or whatever. Sometimes I'm just wait, does he think I'm squandering his money? And I get a little weird, a little paranoid about it. And then I'm no, it's all good, or whatever. I just have to pick up the phone and call him or whatever, just to be hey, we're good, right? Sometimes I feel a little way more self-conscious about that one than any of the other investors have, because, tone sometimes is difficult to ascertain through some sort of text application or whatever. But no, that's getting.
Well, the other thing with that too is, when investors start out, I still remember what it was like the first time I looked at the bank account and got a wire in from an investor, and I was like, oh man, it showed up. And that's a lot of money to a lot of people.
Oh, no question. My first deal wasn't necessarily it was expensive to a lot of people, especially if you're just writing a check with a hope or what, you know what I mean, or an expectation or whatever. But my first deal was, 35, call it 36,000. And from outside money, my portion was going to be, kind of the ancillary that might come up after the fact kind of thing, And and it showed, like you said, it showed up, right? You're just wow, that dude just busted off a $35K check via 3-4 conversations. And granted, going through the due diligence, sending him the collateral, all of these different things, but at the same time, for all intents and purposes, dude just broke off 36K, and I'm sitting over here okay, we're in business. Let's friggin' do this,
Let's go. Let's put it to work. I love it.
No, it was fantastic, and we killed it for him, and now he's ready to rock and roll with more. That's just such a different feeling than a lot of people are used to. So you definitely have to be prepared for that. And it goes back to, again, it sounds weird to kind of harp on it, but swinging for the fences for that type of situation isn't always the best thing. This guy had an expectation on a return based off of diligent communication I had with him, but even more than that, it was security, trust. Returns came second, because he had that. He had that 36K in. I want to say something that was bringing back 6% or something. You know what I mean? An extremely secure, not massive returns, scenario. So for him, he's like, oh, I got 7, but it was, you know what I mean? Like, but it was equally secure. Great. Or, it was better, but in that scenario, the returns were secondary to just keeping his risk low, not losing his money, making good decisions, things like that.
Which is great. Well, speaking of the singles, the bunts, and the doubles, I'm trying to figure out what this characterizes as. I have a property that goes to auction tomorrow in Tampa, Florida, and I'm a little anxious. It went to auction in September, and the homeowner, the borrower, filed a Chapter 13 to stall the auction. Literally filed it like at 9:30 for a 10 o'clock auction. So that'll be another one down the road. Once I get this asset, and it's the fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, because he can do it a second time really before I'm going to spend the money for my bankruptcy attorney to represent me and get the stay removed on it. But this will be an interesting one to talk about because when I bought it, I paid $100,000 for it. Market value around 130 to 140, always depending on interior condition, which I don't really know about. So to me, I was like, this will be great. This is going to be a great investment. And then he files the BK, pushes me out 2 more months because we have to file to relist, and then we have to remarket for the auction. So fingers crossed. The auction's tomorrow. It'll be 10 o'clock for you guys. It'll be 10 o'clock at night, so I will have the whole day of anxiety to hope that he hasn't filed any papers to stall it again. But it'll be interesting. I'm really anxious to see what this one comes out to be.
For a lot of people, these are the conversations you have. I mean, you and I are going to be in San Diego in a couple of weeks, and we're going to be, kind of bunkered down in a room, going over a ton of different assets we're looking to purchase and things like that. But that's what it is, right? Like in show 2, we're already diving in on, here's some places that you could, possibly come into trouble. Here's some great places that you can possibly find some easy wins for yourself and things like that. But really, the show is going to be about that, right? I mean, like, here's the deal we're working on now. Here's the deal we're working on now. Here's the deal. Here's how we're marketing. Here's how we're doing this. But what we really want to also know is what are some of the things that you guys want to cover? We're trying to put together a 2-month guide that both of us would have loved to have had our first, couple of weeks in the business to kind of make sure our ducks were in a row and things like that to really hit the ground running. But what are some things you want us to cover and talk about that just brings some of that nuance and some of that mystery and some of those things out, pulls back the curtain a little bit on the note business, for you? What are some of those things you want to have us cover? I mean, Robbie's got more experience than I do, but from an actual asset acquisition side, but from a marketing side, that's where I come in. But let us know what you want to hear and what you want us to teach you about.
Which is, I mean, it's great. It's, I don't want to say, oh, how can we hold your hand? But man, I had somebody holding my hand, but to a degree, there were some gaps there, and not on their part. They were just gaps that exist when I was getting started. And I think that's a great thing that we're going to be able to fill with this information. And a lot of it is back to what we were talking about last week. Some of it's proximity in that who do you surround yourself with? But if you want to work in the note business and you're not surrounding yourself with people that are doing note deals, how else are you going to hear about the trials, the tribulations, and the wins? I like to celebrate the wins as much as I like to admit, I probably could have made an extra couple grand on that deal in Kansas City.
I'm one of the few people that feels like, I know a lot of people like to say, you learn from failure more than you do success, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if I'm one of the few that believes this. For me, it's not that I disagree completely, but I don't want to learn from failure. I think we're in a really interesting culture, especially because of the startup culture and things like that, entrepreneurial culture, that you want to fail fast to succeed. I get that, right? But I can't really grab a whole, in my life, in my experience and things like that, I learn a ton from my and other people's successes. A lot of people wonder about mentorships and things like that. You want a really great mentorship from an awesome business person like Gary Keller from Keller Williams, go grab his new book, The One Thing. That is a tremendous mentorship from afar from someone like that. And in a situation like this, listening to us go over the successes and failures, I would love to have most of the people listening to this not have to learn from failure. Because one, there's so many zeros behind it that a lot of people aren't ready for and can't rebound from quickly and things like that. But I just feel like you learn so much more from successes than you do failures. I'm totally on the flip side.
There are two things I would hit on there. I agree completely, and what I'd say is I wouldn't want anyone listening to this to learn from failure. I'll admit I got in a lot of trouble when I was younger in high school, running around. But I do remember one thing that was in a conversation at some level I got it with my father, and it was basically like, you keep doing this stuff, but you never do the same thing twice. So you're at least learning not to do the same thing twice. So part of it is if you've heard us say that we did it, don't write us and tell us that you did the same thing. If you get a deed in lieu, tell me. I want an email that says, oh, yeah, we got an offer for a deed in lieu from a borrower. But guess what? We had a conversation with him. It went really great. We asked him to go take pictures of the inside of the unit so we could double check what it looked like. He sent us the key. You just got to ask for these things. And you heard it here. If you haven't ever gotten a deed in lieu, make sure those are two of the first things that you do before you let your servicers start sending everything off to the attorney. Learn from it. Don't repeat it. And now, myself and everybody listening, Chase, you included, had better never not ask those two questions when a deed in lieu comes up in the future.
I was trying.
You better never not.
Okay, cool. All right. No, I'm there with you.
Better
I totally agree with you.
Which you should. You better never not.
Yeah. No, I agree. We'll be tackling obviously a ton more in the next episode. Any parting shots? Episode 2, Robby?
No, man. I'm actually really anxious to go over the marketing stuff because, as you said earlier, and as you know, that's the stuff I need help with. Like, I need help with the marketing stuff. Getting assets, buying them, working them out, not a problem. The marketing, I need you to hold my hand there, buddy. So I'm anxiously looking forward to it.
I was just at an Austin event, and pretty much everybody in the room, that was, because that's it, right? Those are the 3 things, right? It's finding them, it's funding them, and it's getting them either moved or whatever the case is, or from a marketing perspective, a lot of people don't understand the strength of marketing for helping you find them and fund them, and all those things. A lot of people that are in the general or the regular real estate investing world, they view marketing as how am I going to flip this note or how am I going to sell this note or something like that. That's how they view the aspect of marketing. They don't look at marketing as the internal funnel for bringing deals their way or bringing capital their way, or you know what I mean? Like, they don't look at it that way. And that is something that when you flip the switch on that, it can really accelerate your business. Guys, we appreciate you so much for listening. As always, if there's any questions, comments, anything like that you have, you can always send us an email. We got Rob at notemba.com, Chase at notemba.com. You can just go by the website, fill all that out, send us an email, whatever the case is. And of course, if you have not already, subscribe to the show. Give us some feedback over on iTunes. We'd appreciate that. Thank you so much, and we will catch you next time.
Take care, guys. Have a good one.